In this session, we have amongst us a very eminent speaker, Dr. Kenneth R. Valpey. I would request Dr. Sir, kindly introduce our speaker, Dr. Kenneth R. Valpey, and kindly take over the session. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to namaskar. I would like to welcome Swagatam Kenneth Valpeji to this noted webinar. Kenneth Valpeji is a PhD. He is a research fellow of Oxford Center for Hindu Studies and member of Bhaktivedanta Research Center Academic Advisory Board. I would like to welcome him to deliver his presentation. He is going to tell about between William Blake and the Bhagavad Gita, rebooting the imagination for troubled time. After listening to the Advaita Vedanta perspective and the perspective of Swami Vivekananda, respected Kenneth Valpey will tell us, I think he will make a bridge between Bhagavad Gita, the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and William Blake. So you are most welcome to deliver your presentation. Swagatam and Namaskar. Please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Islam. I'm happy to see you again. I was fortunate to meet you, I think it was about 2 years ago in Kolkata. And it's so nice to be with you again, although in these circumstances, it's not ideal. I also want to thank our organizers, especially Dr. Goswami, has been putting in so much effort the last several days, bringing all of this together. And I want to say how much I appreciate everyone helping in the background, and also the presentations that have been presented so far today. I find very fascinating. Now, let's see if we get the technology. I have a PowerPoint here, and I need to ask, first of all, whether this is visible. If I can get some indication that this presentation of PowerPoint is visible, perhaps by WhatsApp, that would be helpful. In any case, I'll just begin speaking. William Blake may seem a very unlikely person to reference, to speak about in this conference. And I hope to show how he might be relevant for our theme. And at the same time, I want to say that this is very much exploratory. I am particularly interested in the notion of imagination and how this may be relevant in what we call broadly spiritual life, as we heard from Dr. Brew. And as I'm saying in the title, I want to try to make a link with the Bhagavad Gita. And historians tell us that William Blake most probably encountered the Bhagavad Gita. There is some evidence that he was aware of this text, and there are traces of indication that reflecting in his writing from the Bhagavad Gita. I won't be going into detail about that, but what I'm hoping to show is that by highlighting this connection, we can see something of the limitations of prevailing forms of thinking and imagination to address the stressful psychological conditions of our time. So I want to say I'm attempting, aiming to show a direction.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes,
Sorry for interrupting. Could you please
yes.
share your PowerPoint by minimizing your screen? We can't see the.
Okay, I was hoping that I'm doing that, but I see now I
Yes,
have to
we
minimize
can't see that.
this.
You can
Okay,
minimize your screen and share the PowerPoint and open the PowerPoint in the slideshow mode.
do
Yes,
you
sir.
see it now?
No,
Do you
sir.
see?
No, sir.
Okay,
So if you can
then
kindly minimize your screen, right now
yes,
the
this,
screen, minimize it
yeah,
and
this,
show the PowerPoint.
I did minimize the screen. However,
And
I'm sorry if this is not showing now. So there must be some trick which I thought we had worked out, but I'm not getting it. Can you give some further points? Because I minimized the screen and I have set it for PowerPoint. Maybe I should restart it. Share screen
but
and PowerPoint. Do you see it now? Still not, huh?
no,
Okay,
no, sir.
all right. In that case, I will simply speak and
তোমাকে PowerPoint পাঠাও।
I can go ahead. We don't completely depend on this. I can simply go ahead and speak. Otherwise, we spend too much time, I think. So my aim is that we can show a direction toward human empowerment through imagination. And the way I'm doing this is by taking William Blake's 4 levels of imagination and vision as a kind of springboard and challenge to stretch our powers of imagination through the aid of the Bhagavad Gita's bhakti regenerative vision and process of human empowerment to be, as is said in the 6th chapter of the Gita, to be never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. Yasmin sito na dukkena gurunapi vichalyate. But before we go to Mr. Blake, I want to refer to, to 2 modern psychologists, Christopher Peterson and Martin Seligman, who are involved in this very modern study of what is called positive psychology. And in one of their works, they identified various strengths of character, strengths of virtue. And the last category of these they include is called strengths of transcendence. And they list 5 strengths of transcendence. And what I want to do is come back to these after visiting Mr. Blake and the Gita and see what we can appreciate about them. These 5 strengths of transcendence are appreciation of beauty, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. And they elaborate, these scholars elaborate on definitions of each of these and how these may relate to positive psychology. All right, William Blake was a artist, a poet, and a visionary living from 1757 to 1827. And he has been identified with what's come to be called the Romantic cultural movement of Europe of the time. And in the midst of that, he very much opposed the prevailing zeitgeist, the prevailing mentality of the time that privileged reason and deplored imagination, even regarding it as dangerous. So this was the mood of the time. Science is everything, imagination can be even dangerous. For Blake, imagination, in contrast, was the central faculty of both God and humans. Imagination is central. So Blake had this idea of imagination as existing essentially on 4 levels. And he had special names for each of these. The first is, according to his mythographic, his mythological thinking, his own creative mythology. So the first, and we can say lowest level of imagination and vision, he calls Ulro. And this is the reality of quantity. I'll elaborate on each of these, but first I'll go through the 4. The second, he simply calls generation. This is the reality of production and reproduction. Then the third, which is a more luminous level of imagination and vision, he calls Beulah. This is the reality of relationships. And finally, his 4th level, he has 2 names. One is Eden, and the other is eternity. And this is the reality of transcendence. So now I will elaborate briefly on each of these, and then I will get back to this 5-fold strengths of transcendence. So Ulro, we can say, represents scientism. He painted or engraved a picture of Newton, very much absorbed in measuring something on a scroll of paper. This is the belief that all and only scientifically gained knowledge is true and real. And we may see how this is manifest today in this circumstance of the COVID-19 pandemic, as the preoccupation and concern with metrics, statistics of people infected, numbers of people dying as a result of the disease, financial loss calculations, graphs and charts of trends and projections, and so on and so forth. This becomes very much foremost in the news today. We may venture a comparison of Blake's idea of this lower level of consciousness, of vision, of imagination, with what we find Krishna describing in the Bhagavad Gita as tamoguna. Some features of tamoguna he refers to, especially in the 14th chapter, are that it is born of ignorance, ajnanajam, that it is delusive, mohanam, that it is accompanied by madness, pramadha. And generally we understand tamagun in terms of the notion of darkness and of ignorance. So Blake was saying that our preoccupation with numbers, our preoccupation with counting, is problematic because, in fact, there is no vision there. There's no imagination. There's no real ability to approach freedom from misery. His second level of consciousness he called generation, and to this form, to this level, he identified a particular figure he called Los. Los was a person who he portrayed as carrying a large iron hammer, and this Los character was bound by what he called the chain of jealousy, the chain of jealousy. This generation level is characterized by the spirit of reproduction, and we may say, jumping ahead of his time, of the Darwinian struggle for life, for which this is a somewhat expanded imagination with some awareness of cycles and seasons, and whereby prominent come the focus on manufacture and farming. Manufacture and farming become central foci of this level. But further, Blake, with his very fertile imagination, considered Los as what he called the great spirit signifying mankind's imaginative force put to action. He labors to build a utopia of frenetic activity, and Blake had a name for this utopia. He called it Golgonooza, and he drew what looks very much like a yantra, a four-sided yantra with many details of the elements of this Golgonooza. And he superimposed it on the city of London of his time. He was a resident of London. And with this general idea of generation, he is, we can say, presenting essentially in relation to Bhagavad Gita, a parallel with what Krishna refers to as Rajaguna, from, of course, the Sankhya tradition. Rajaguna is the quality of energy and passion, which Krishna refers to in chapter 14 of the Gita as Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam, born of association with hankering. It brings great attachment, fruitive or selfish mentality, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire, hankering, and greed. And so, because of being rajasic of this mode, we can say of Blake's idea, Los may be represented today in global industry, the military-industrial complex, as it was called by a former US president, Dwight Eisenhower, the transnational corporation or corporate conglomerate that now strangles the world and accelerates Anthropocene environmental devastation, climate catastrophe, and zoonotic disease. And hence, because of all of this, an increase of global anxiety. Well, so much for the second level. We go to the third level of Blake's levels, 4 levels of imagination and vision. And again, he called this Beulah. And this is the realm of the subconscious, and it's the realm of awareness for a desire, awareness of a desire for relationships. The prominent emotions here are more luminous, we can say: sympathy, care, sensitivity, happiness, love, and affection. And later scholar has suggested he shows interest here. Blake shows that this level is indicating the I-thou relationality. This becomes prominent over the I-it non-relationality. Of course, this is coming from Martin Buber's philosophy, later philosophy. And another positive feature of this level is an increased sense of justice and fairness, which is all very good. And so on this level, we may speak of a parallel with Krishna's description of sattva guna, characterized by piety, illumination, a sense of happiness, increased knowledge and awareness, and a lifestyle including eating habits conducive to increased duration of life. Ayu sattva balarogya sukha priti vivardhana. And I think there's a significant parallel with sattva guna. However, Krishna in the Gita speaks about how sattva guna is also a guna. It is a conditioned state. And we see this also reflected, I find, in Blake's work. Yes, in this third level, there is now a focus on relationships, including an intimation of a connection with divinity. But on this third level, Blake calls Beulah, there is a downward sliding tendency toward control of relationships, which leads to oppression instead of justice and fairness. And what do we see manifest in our wider world today? An expanding worldwide culture of surveillance. And this, again, is bringing increased anxiety and distrust. And I would suggest it's accompanied by a proliferation of conspiracy theories. We heard how Swami Vivekananda said, don't listen to rumors. So now we have rumors expanding all over by the internet, and this is causing only more anxiety. So summarizing, I would say that Blake summarizes the 3 levels. He says in his poetic language, referring to the people who are subjected to the 3 gunas, he says, they wander moping in their heart, a sun, a dreary moon, a universe of fiery constellations in their brain, an earth of wintry woe beneath their feet and round their loins, waters or winds or clouds or brooding lightnings and pestilential plagues. So his last reference to pestilential plagues is, of course, relevant. On the fourth level, which again he refers to as Eden or eternity, imagination now goes beyond the mere speculative to the generative, to yogic connection with divinity, with the Supreme Person, the source of all being and becoming. This level includes the best of the first three levels of imagination, because each of those levels he gives some credit for. The first, Ulro, he gives value in discernment. In the second level, generation, he gives value to expansiveness. And for the third level, Blake gives value to feeling. But on this fourth level, the cosmos is alive, it is pluriform, it is a vision crucial to the sense of hope, enabling actions to become what Krishna calls koshala, skillful, artistic, bringing about welfare for all. Again, going back to Krishna's summary in chapter 14 of attitudes of one who is transcendent to the three gunas, I think, again, this resonates well with Blake's fourth stage of imagination and vision. Summarizing this, Krishna says, being undisturbed by illumination, attachment, delusion, when these are present, that's the three gunas, nor longing for them when they disappear. Being with equal vision amidst the dualities of this world, including the personal experiences of being honored or dishonored. So there we have a sketch of Blake's vision. I'm trying to juxtapose them with Bhagavad Gita for the purpose of focusing, highlighting on this notion of imagination. But now let's go back to modern psychological thought and the notion of psychological well-being in relation to imagination. I want to suggest that this parallel can bring us to a better understanding of collective imagination as it works negatively in the present time and pointing toward the higher level of liberating imagination. So again, Christopher Peterson and Martin Seligman, in their positive psychological study titled Character, Strengths, and Virtues, a Handbook and Classification, list 5 types of strengths of transcendence. And these are, again, appreciation of beauty, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. And what I want to suggest is that what makes each of these components of the strength of transcendence, what makes them a strength is an awakening of our power of imagination. But what sort of imagination? That we understand, I believe, in such sacred texts as the Bhagavad Gita. He is showing how to cultivate transcendent imagination. And specifically in the Bhagavad Gita, I would call attention to a particular verse we don't usually think of in terms of imagination. This is in the 18th chapter, Brahmabhuta Prasannatma Nasochati Nakangshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. One who is thus transcendental transcendentally situated, at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. Such a person is equally disposed toward every living being. In that state, such a person attains pure devotion unto me. And finally, I want to share a short poem by William Blake that I think also points in this direction. It's a simple kind of poem. I believe he wrote it fairly early in his career. It's from his Songs of Innocence and Experience. And this is from the section called Songs of Innocence. And the title of the poem is The Divine Image. And it goes like this. To mercy, pity, peace, and love, all pray in their distress. And to these virtues of delight, return their thankfulness. For mercy, pity, peace, and love is God our Father dear, and mercy, pity, peace, and love is man, his child and care. For mercy has a human heart, pity a human face, and love the human form divine, and peace the human dress. Then every man of every clime that prays in his distress, praise to the human form divine, love, mercy, pity, peace. And all must love the human form in heathen, Turk, or Jew, where mercy, love, and pity dwell, there God is dwelling too. So I will end there. And again, I want to thank our organizers and hosts. And if there is some question or discussion, I'll be happy to try to respond.
Okay, namaskar. And it was really a very thought-provoking speech delivered by Kenneth Valpey. Thank you very much for giving us, for taking us to a completely new discourse that addresses William Blake and Srimad Bhagavad Gita. I really would like to appreciate the approach that you have made to present your speech, that is exploratory approach. Particularly, we have noticed that the 4 levels of consciousness of William Blake is presented in her speech, in his speech. The 4 levels are Ulro, generation, Beulah, Eden or eternity. So it's a kind of topographic representation of Blake's 4 levels of imagination. This is really very interesting. And another point, you have also shown us some PowerPoint, which one slide shows the outline of Yantra and the geographical boundary of London. So this correlation is also very, very interesting. You also pointed out the Darwinian struggle of life. So these are some of the main, these were some of the main points of your presentation. And finally, with reference to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, you have quoted from Ashtadash Adhyaya, the Moksha Yoga, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na Sochati na Kankshati. So the correlation between William Blake and Bhagavad Gita is really interesting. So now I would request If there is any question from the participant, please. Any question is there?
Yeah, there are a few questions actually. Professor Valpey, one question which has come from Dr. Tinni Goswami is, how can we relate Blake's idea on sorrow with the teachings of Bhagavad Gita? Your take on it?
Yes, a good question. I need to emphasize and be a little confessional that the short notice for giving this presentation didn't allow me to go into the depth I wanted to. Of course, starting from the side of the Gita, Krishna, this is his very first instruction to Arjuna in chapter 2. Asochan anvasochastang pragyavadangs chabhasase gatasun akatasun na anusochanti pandita na anusochanti. Do not lament, do not be sorrowful. But he's saying anusochanti, do not go on being sorrowful. He doesn't say be like a stone and not feel for those who are suffering. But he's, of course, pointing Arjuna in to the transcendent level from step one. He's making this very strong point of this distinction between self and body, which then he elaborates essentially throughout the Gita. So from my little knowledge and understanding of William Blake, I would just point again, he is the level of consciousness that he is interested in particular is this fourth level. But if we think about this in terms of imagination, this is the key, I think, to making this connection. When Krishna says, Brahmabhuta prasannatma, na sochati na kangshati. Well, we can start out by imagining the possibility of experiencing not lamenting. We can exercise that faculty of our imagination. What would that be like? What would it be like to not be hankering for things which I don't have or for conditions which are not there? What would that be like? That, I'm suggesting through Blake, is an activation of our imagination to the point that it becomes reality. Blake saw imagination as, in a certain sense, equivalent to God. He was so much the opposite of the spirit of his times, where reason prevailed. He said, no, imagination is what makes us human, and it's what makes us divine. And so to connect with the Gita in this way, I think is helpful. Sama sarveshu bhuteshu. What could it be like to actually see all living beings equally? Not just theoretically, and not just, I can quote Bhagavad Gita, that's very nice, but actually, so that requires a kind of awakening of our imagination, which can lead then to realization.
Yeah, and Professor Islam, if I may just proceed with the other questions as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if other questions are there, yes, please.
The second question was from my side. I found the words which were used by Blake to be pretty interesting. For example, the the word Golgonooza, which he had used, is it has some parallels with perhaps the biblical concept of Golgotha, because I'm not sure, but it seemed like they rhymed in a sense. And secondly, the concept of Beulah also had something of the surveillance state mechanism, which Bentham speaks about in his idea of the panopticon. So, if you could just elaborate on that.
Okay. Again, I'm going to show my ignorance, but I think it's very possible that there's some conscious connection of Golgonooza with Golgotha, but I wouldn't be able to say without first consulting the references. There's actually a dictionary of terms that Blake used. There's a whole dictionary because he used such a strange terminology. And I could get back to you after looking at that, but for now I can't say.
No issues.
The general point, though, is he identified himself very much as a Christian. And this was one reason I wanted to bring this in, to bring him into this assembly, because I understood this should be an interreligious discussion, and I wanted to explore like this. He was, however, no traditional Christian. He was a radical. He was what was called a dissenter. He was also politically very radical. He's a very colorful character in so many ways. But this relation to Bentham's panopticon, that would be another interesting and possibly rich comparison. I hadn't thought of that. Thank you for bringing it up.
Welcome. There was also another question, Professor Valpey, but I can't find it just at the present. If Srimanti, can you locate the third question, which is there, and please relay it to Professor Valpey? Yeah.
Yes, sir. The third question is from Dr. Shormishta Debasu. She's asking, if anyone does not believe in spirituality, then how Blake's idea can enhance him to become influenced?
It may not be possible if a person is determined to not accept that there is such reality beyond what Krishna would refer to as the three gunas. But I think here we can be helped by, again, something Krishna says in the beginning of chapter, is it 14 or 17, I think. He says, Shraddha Mayo Yang Purusho. The Purusha, the living being, is Shraddha Maya, is full of faith, is constituted of faith. Now, where is that faith invested is another question. But often we hear of the atheist saying, I have no faith in God. All right, but you do have faith in something. Where is that invested may help you to see how it can be advanced. And I think, again, going back to Blake's in putting such importance on imagination, maybe not Blake's imagination in particular, but giving space for the imaginative power to comprehend the possibility of transcendence, of spirituality, may lead such a person forward.
Okay, so our time is already over, so I would like to congratulate both the speakers, Swami Mahamedhananda ji and Kenneth Valpey ji, for presenting their beautiful and thought-provoking lecture. I just would like to again congratulate the Kolkata Society for Asian Studies and BRC for organizing this very eventful, interesting program. And Ferdinando Sardella, in his speech, wanted to mention that modern science is lacking the ability to explain certain things. At least this seminar wanted to find out some question with regard to spirituality, with regard to the sacred text associated with this. I think this is going to be a milestone in the academic. So with these few words, I would like to hand over the microphone to for the next presentation or announcement.
Thank you, sir. Due to paucity of time, couldn't take up one more question. But if sir has, uh, okay, thank you for all the. I would like to thank all the four speakers and our esteemed moderators for the wonderful and thoughtful sessions that we experienced today. Uh, tomorrow will be the second day for the international webinar. The session starts from 6 p.m. The YouTube link to all the participants will be mailed today after the session gets over. Thank you for attending today's session, and we hope to see you all tomorrow again. Thank you.